Hey now, welcome to America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian Saperstein. This is Rob Vale, and we are at the dirty side of the track. Rob, what are we doing this week?
This week, we are going to be doing our crash course into Formula One. For all those new listeners, hopefully something to help educate them so when they're watching the races, things make sense. And for the veterans out there, it'll be ammunition for them to poke fun at us when we make lots and lots of mistakes, and they can revel in pointing that out to us. So really looking forward to this.
All right, let's talk a little bit about sort of an F1 glossary, kind of just a good feel for what some of these terms mean. And we are the Dirty Side of the Track podcast, the leading Formula One podcast out of the Americas. And so let's talk a little bit about what the dirty side means versus the racing line. So as cars kind of use the circuit, all the debris from the tires and around the track, it gets blown off the racing line that the cars follow. And the racing line is obviously the fastest way around the track. Just to explain that, you hit the apex, find the fastest way out, and then back into the next corner. So as that stuff gets blown off to the other side of the track, the debris can kind of accumulate, whether it's on the left-hand side, if you're going fast on the right, or whatever it may be. And so the dirty side of the track is where all the little pieces of tire and car and carbon fiber and dirt and whatever accumulate. And what they call that are the marbles. That's the main culprit of the dirty side. It's bits of rubber that come off, they pile up on the dirty side. And these small rubber pellets are known as the marbles, which fill up a good portion of the dirty side of the track.
So we haven't lost our marbles. We're full of marbles on the dirty side.
Speak for yourself.
And that's what you'll hear quite often. Like when someone throws something down the outside and then spin off, you quite will often hear the commentators talk about, he's lost it on the marbles. So if you hear anything about marbles, it's the little rubber pellets off the tires, like Brian said. What can lead you to go off the track as well is kind of getting caught in dirty air. You'll hear dirty air all the time, and it's got nothing to do with kind of how clean that air is or telling some rude jokes. It's literally just the turbulence. We covered it on one of the previous episodes when we talked about the new cars for 2022 being designed to not create this dirty air. So it's just the choppy air that's thrown off the back of the car, like the turbulence that a plane hits. So when you hear people talk about dirty air, it's that wash of turbulent air coming off the back of the car in front, which leads us on to people talking about loss of downforce, or how much downforce setting have they got this week. Think about the way that air flows over a plane. A plane is designed that when air flows over that wing, it creates lift and takes the plane into the sky. And a Formula One car is kind of an upside down plane. The air flows over it and pushes that car down into the track. The more you get pushed down in the track, more grip you get, the more speed you're going to be able to carry through circuits. So downforce is the force of the air pushing the car down into the circuit. So you'll hear them talk about high-speed circuits are going to be low downforce circuits, and twisty-turny ones tend to be high downforce circuits because you can sacrifice the speed because you want the cornering speed. So downforce plays a big deal in F1.
So when a driver has to come into the pits, their mechanic or engineer will get on the radio and say, box, which means come into the pits. It's time to park in the box that is painted in front of our garage, not garage, and we will service your tires and possibly your wings, but that's all they would do. And then I talked a little bit about tires earlier, blistering, the imbalance sort of temperatures that can occur, and you get the outer surfaces and the blisters, they pop through, causing grip issues. And then sort of the opposite of that is graining, where the outer layer of the tire heats up too much and sort of melts and sticks to itself to create an uneven grain surface. Again, both blistering and graining create grip and performance challenges on the tires. And the last tire note I'd give, hopefully forever, is that if a driver brakes too hard, and this is one of my favorites, Max did this in Saudi Arabia, if you brake too hard and lock the wheels, because they don't have anti-lock brakes, you lock the wheels, you start sliding with tires that aren't moving. What happens is that sliding just cuts the tire off and it flat spots. It creates basically a big patch of flatness. And so when you start driving again, now it's like boom, 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 boom. As you go around, it creates vibration, slows you down, and it really impacts your grip as the tire rolls around. And so flat spots are not something any driver wants. And it's a mistake when they brake too hard and they cause a lockup.
Okay, next on our glossary is one that Brian's kind of already hit, but we're going to cover it again in the glossary section here, is the undercut. which is just basically overtaking people in the pit stops, utilizing your pit stop strategy to be quicker around. And when they go in, you'll have already flown around your outlap at high speed and jump over them. And you'll hear this a lot because they'll refer to different circuits because of the length of the pit lane and how long it takes to come in, because it's not just those insane 2.4 second stationary pit stops. Everyone thinks of a pit stop as being amazingly quick, but when you actually take into account the amount of time it takes to leave the track, is it 50 kilometers per hour or is it 80 kilometers per hour? I can't remember what the 80 is, the speed limit when you come into the pit. Although it feels when you're driving that out on the regular road, that feels quite quick. In one of those cars, it's ridiculously slow. And as Brian said earlier, you can be losing anything between kind of 24 seconds for the whole thing. So very powerful. Next one that we've got, I'm not sure we're going to see it this year, but we're going to cover it anyway, because I'm not sure about the new car design, if it's still going to be there. I couldn't find anything online around this, and it's called bottoming out. And the commentators will mention it when you kind of see this big shower of sparks behind a car as they drive through. It's not anything breaking or falling off. It's actually part and parcel of underneath every single car, there's a wooden plank, which in the high-tech world of Formula One still amazes me. There's a wooden plank. I kind of have visions of it like bolted on with rusty bolts, but there's a plank underneath that makes sure that every car is riding at the correct ride height, and they got to make sure they stick to that after the race, otherwise they can get disqualified. And what they basically do to prevent the damage to the plank is they put these titanium skid blocks.
There's the modern aspect. It's the titanium skid blocks that go on the wooden plank. You make it sound like you're driving a Morgan Arrow.
It's still, they couldn't come up with a better thing than a wooden plank. But anyway, it's as you get the undulations of the circuit, these titanium skid blocks can sometimes catch the circuit, and you get those fantastic looking shower of sparks at the back. With the new cars and the under the car ground effect stuff and the channels, I'm not sure if the barge board is still there this year. Not the barge board, the wooden plank. But hey,
we'll see. So when a car is at the back, we mentioned this when we talked a little bit about flags in an earlier segment. It's a back marker. The cars that are at the back of the field, you hear this a lot as the race progresses and cars get lapped. And the back markers are literally cars that are getting lapped, and they have to get out of the way of the leaders. And what they don't want to do is interfere with the racing that a leader and the second car may have with each other. So the back markers kind of have to get out of the way and let the cars lapping pass through. And what's fascinating to me is, there are often times where these cars that are really caning it, going for it, have to kind of lift and coast being the idea that they need to conserve fuel and or protect tires. So they lift off the throttle as they head into a braking zone. You actually have to finish the race with how much? A liter of fuel? Do I have that right? I don't.
Some predetermined amount of fuel needs to remain in the car.
So Seb finished second at a race in 2021 and was disqualified because he didn't have a liter of fuel in his Aston Martin to provide. They actually had him pull over on the track as soon as he crossed the start finish line, knowing they'd maybe not put enough fuel in to get through the race, trying to lighten the load, lighten the weight. But you either protect your fuel or your tires at the end. And Lewis, by the way, in case anyone cares, and Checo, two of the best tire protectors on the grid.
Okay, then we get to something which usually comes into conversation after somebody's crashed out, to be honest, because somebody blames the brake bias as not being set correctly. But they're not talking about people being biased towards brakes. They're talking about the balance between the front and the back wheels. So a perfectly balanced car is going to have the brake bias set up just as the driver likes it, so that as he hits the brake pedal, everything goes the way that he wants it to. But when they have too much brake bias on the front tires, then you can get this situation where the front brakes bite too hard, and we kind of see things spinning. But they'll also take the surface, especially if it's a wet race, they might switch more bias towards the rear of the cars so that they don't get that kind of front end biting in and sending people around in a 360. My next one on our glossary here, DRS. Commentators actually do a good, I think they realize they're throwing the acronym around all the time. They quite often explain it, but it's the drag reduction system. It was a kind of a crutch introduced to try to get around the dirty air problems. So
a crutch, not a crotch. Crutch.
No, I didn't say a crotch.
Yeah, you did. At least it sounded so in your British accent, but keep going.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. At certain points on the track, there is a DRS detection zone, and if you are within 1 second of the car in front, then your DRS system will magically spring into life and be enabled, which means that then I think it's usually 2 kind of straight sections on that circuit. A flap in your rear wing will open, which gives you magical turbo powers, and I can't remember the differential. I want to say it's something like 40 miles per hour, something like that kind of.
It depends on the length of the DRS zone, but yes.
Yeah. So it's a way of being able for you to be able to pull out of that dirty air, get that turbocharge and go past them. It's worked with varying degrees. Some circuits, the DRS system is just too powerful and it's just like a gimme overtake. Once you get within that second of the car in front, you're essentially going to overtake them as soon as you get to the DRS zone. But I think they've kind of tweaked it down the years, and we'll have to see how needed it is with the new cars this year.
So one of the things people ask is, what is the perfect track, right? And it's not necessarily sort of a green track that they just rock up and go drive at. If you are watching Formula One all the time, in 2020 at Turkey, they had a track that had been recently resurfaced, and it's like ice. What happens is, as the cars go round and round, the track gets rubbered in. You'll hear this phrase, rubbering in. And what happens is, as the tracks, stop laughing, and as the tracks, the dirty side of the mind. And so as the tracks get rubbered in, the tires kind of give off a little bit of the rubber. It's almost acts like a tacky film. It allows for cars to corner faster. And throughout the course of the race weekend, the tracks get more and more rubbered in from all the cars going around, the rubber coming off, the pieces being out there. And I would actually highlight in 2020, I think it was, again, at Istanbul for sure, they actually took street cars. This is true, at night when they couldn't safely race cars. And they had them turn their headlights on and race around on the racing line as much as they could to keep adding rubber to the newly asphalted track. So I love that story. Another couple things, oversteer, understeer. This is in F1 and in regular cars. The idea of oversteer is when you're steering your car and your rear end comes out too fast and starts sliding around behind you. And you have to overcorrect your front wheels. The difference is understeer, which is, I think, worse, because what happens is you turn your wheels and nothing happens. You say, I'm going to go make this corner. You turn the wheels and you just keep going in the same direction you were going in. So oversteer is easier to correct than understeer. Understeer is a common front wheel drive car situation. Oversteer is common for rear wheel drive cars, but it happens to both to Formula One cars. So the drivers have to watch that as they're powering through corners.
Yeah, you start to see them. A lot of these things will all stack up on top of each other. And I think as you start to see tire degradation kick in, you'll start hearing Brian's favorite, good old driver radio, where they start just complaining about the fact the car's starting to understeer, oversteer, or got blistering graining. It's tire moaning and steering problems are kind of, I think, some of the favorite moaning moments over radio. Okay, we've got a couple left on the glossary. We have got the Halo. Open cockpit cars, and used to be truly open cockpit. If you go back and just Google some images from kind of 15, 20 years ago, there is really nothing in front of or around the driver's head at all. Horrible incident. It was Bianchi. It was in Suzuka.
Yeah, Jules. I can't remember if it was Suzuka or not. Yeah, I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah, and kind of straight under a recovery vehicle, and we won't go into the gruesome details of that one. But one of the things they piloted a number of different designs to kind of increase head safety, to maintain the open cockpit kind of look and feel of the sport, but while also increasing driver safety. So now you've got this protective shell. I don't know what you'd call it, but a halo, I guess. It is a halo. It's like a ring of safety around the driver's head. Came into play massively with Lewis and Max this year, when the back wheel of Max's car basically sat on Lewis's head, but also on the halo system as well. So
and it clearly saved Roman Grosjean, 2020 Bahrain.
Yep. So good addition from a safety perspective. When they talk about the halo, that's what they're talking about. Brian's already hit Apex. I'm sure a lot of people watching motorsport know what an Apex is. But if not, then essentially every corner has got its own fastest racing line through it. And it's got three main sections. It's got the entry or the turning point where you need to commit to the corner, and it's got the apex, which I think is, I can't remember the technical term, but it's the closest part to the inside of the track between the entry and the exit. And the exit is obviously the exit. So you'll often hear them talking about needing to hit the apex, especially on qualification, because the perfect qualification lap is when you hook up hitting every single apex at the best amount of speed. You'll see them not hit racing line on purpose sometimes during race conditions, because maybe they're looking to, if you're following a car in front, you might be trying to get out of the dirty air. You might be trying to just fool them into thinking you're making a move when you're not. So you'll often see cars moving around. So they're not always going to be trying to hit the apex. But if you're just trying for pure speed, then that's what you're after. Yeah, I've got nothing more to say about apexes, Brian.
I'll just say I've done a lot of high performance drivers ed days, and they often put cones at the apexes of each corner, apex of each corner. So, you know, the closer you get to the cone, the better you did. And I've never gotten that close because I'm not that good. So formation lap, it's at the start of the race. You may watch and you'll see everyone with their teams getting their cars set up on the grid, and then everyone leaves, but then they kind of take a dilly-dally around. It's that formation lap. It's the time to get around where they get their car tires warmed up a little bit. They get their cars kind of moving. And it gets the team a chance to clear the grid fully, and the cars come back, park in their spots, and they're ready to go for the actual start of the race. I mentioned box before, the opportunity to get into the pits, the paddock in the pits. That's where all the work gets done. Behind the pit wall, the motorhomes, the storage, the transportations. The pits are the garages themselves. But then the paddock is behind it, one side of it where they get all the work done. And they usually have a dedicated access road so people can get in and out of that area during the race without having to go over the racetrack. And then Rob closes out with your favorite French term.
Parc fermé. I'm not going to try a French accent there, but it literally means in French closed park. And people are constantly on about under parc fermé conditions, and it gets referred to all the time. I knew kind of what it was, but then researching this one, I actually kind of went and read up on what it really is. So this was actually a little bit of education for me as well. But I knew that at the end of each race, the FIA bring in their scrutineers to check all the cars to be compliant with all the rules after a race. So whether it's withdrawing the fuel out of the car, or whether it's looking at that wooden block underneath the car, but essentially they check the cars for compliance and then release the car back to the team. And nothing is allowed to be touched while it's in there. As soon as you drop the car into parc fermé, the park is closed and you may not go anywhere near your car. What you also have is at certain points during a race weekend, they will declare that certain parts are under parc fermé conditions. So the car might not physically be parked in the parc fermé at the end, but they will say if the car's on the grid or whatever it is, you can't make any changes to the car when you're under parc fermé, although you can, because F1 being F1 always has to have a list of exceptions. So there's a permitted list of things you're allowed to do. So when you're under parc fermé, where you're not allowed to make any changes to the car, you can make the permitted list of changes. And
just
everyone wonders why this is a confusing sport. But you'll hear that a lot, and that's where all the cars have to go at the end. And that's why sometimes the race result can be, like Brian said earlier, you'll get the podium, you get all the points given out, everyone thinks the race ended a certain way, and then one of these scrutineers can kind of come up to the race director and go, excuse me, but that car didn't pass XYZ, and you get disqualifications. It can come through hours, sometimes a day or so after a race has taken place. I think that concludes our glossary section, Brian.